I think that's that. So that's terrific. That's Charlie finishing up. So for everyone who's heading over this way, welcome. Right, let's crack on, shall we? I presume you can hear me. I'm just going to check. Welcome to the home. Yep, that's me. Good. Right. So this is the home office. Let's go face. Hello everyone. Welcome to well, it's not really part two. It's just going to be a repeat of the earlier session, essentially, for anyone who missed it. Hopefully we've got some more people who are interested in careers questions. So whilst I'm always keen to answer technical questions, there's going to be a Rail Natter, episode 2 of Rail Natters on at 7 tonight. Good grief, it's been a day of things. Also getting submissions out for the day job and doing some good work there. Feels like a reasonably productive day, which is nice. So we're all stuck at home. It's been great following all of the absolutely terrific Human Rail Library content that's been going out. Some really terrific feeds, all sorts of people getting involved. Going through the hashtag is just it's really nice seeing all these people, huge range of different people involved in the rail industry. It's exciting, it's cool. For my part, I'm going to be talking about permanent way engineering, but just more broadly about engineering and what makes engineering, particularly railway engineering, something that I absolutely adore doing. This is literally people ask, oh, what's your dream job? I'm in my dream job. I absolutely love it. So let's do some stuff with slides because I think I can. The technology enables it. Right. So here we go. Oh, and do launch any questions you have in my direction. Lewis can hear me. Excellent. Launch any questions you have in my general direction, and I will do my best. Hello. There are 2 Lewises, in fact. Hello, both of you. So this first slide we've got up just now is a picture of the Borders Railway in Scotland. A really nice bit of, particularly this picture, is a really nice little weavy sort of alignment, and there's all sorts going on in there. We've got a bridge, we've got sort of some earthworks stuff going on. You've got lots of lovely forestry and trees and woodland and lots of good stuff that you have to think about. Obviously, the bit that I'm most interested in is seeing the lovely, beautifully weavy little bit of permanent way alignment there, the track alignment that allows trains to run nice and fast, but also avoids us bulldozing things in a straight line. And my day job is creating that. Me and my team or the team that I'm part of, we are permanent way engineers. We design railway alignments for faster trains, bigger trains, more frequent trains, and we either the existing railway or we, if we can do that with the existing railway, great. Sometimes we can't, and we have to build new railway lines. And not all new railway lines look like High Speed 2. This is an example of a railway line that used to exist, but was closed and was reopened again more recently, and is now an incredibly busy commuter line, and also very popular with tourists. But how do I go from this lovely... Wait a minute, I need to get better at me pointing. I'll get the instinct for this eventually. This down here. No. This down here. How do I get from this down here to... or get to that from what's in my brain? Well, how we do that is... with this. This is my design. These are my design tools, the design software, and you can see a bit of a weavy alignment here. And this is kind of day to day is designing railways. So you can see there's an existing pair of tracks. You've got there we are. There's the existing rails, and I think that those things there are what we call slew traces, which is sort of how close to the existing railway we are. And we pick that information up using a variety of survey techniques. So, things like, sometimes we use drone surveys, but most of the time it's kind of a laser unit sort of sat, and we pick things up with the detailing staff, and surveyors go out, all of us wearing, PP, and pick that information up. And then there's a condition survey as well. Condition survey that might look a bit like this. So I'm not always at my desk. Sometimes they're kind of plodding along on the ballast. Looking there, some nice G44s, fast clips, a little cant marker there. God, brings back memories. But most of the time I'm in the office. There's a nice red signal to show I'm safe, and I'm making the same jokes I did in the previous one. Apologies if anyone you watching it again. There's a nice adjustment switch. And essentially, when I'm out on track, I'm looking to check, firstly, what the condition of the existing materials are, and secondly, what's actually there. Because the stuff that gets picked, the information that we get from asset records or from the topographical survey, that's kind of picking out where everything is, aren't necessarily 100% accurate. So we kind of need to verify that. As you can see, railways are very green, particularly when there's all this foliage growing up through. Don't look at that. Don't pay attention. Right, so let's see, any questions while I'm hammering through this? We've got a question from Bjarn. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Bjarn. Tell me if I'm not. Sincere apologies. What is the difference between mechanical and civil engineering? Because in Belgium, we all start as civil engineers, and after a year and a half, we have to choose what we want to specialise into. To be honest, that's the same in the UK, but we don't call it civil engineering, we call it just engineering. So you can start a generic sort of just an engineering degree. This isn't always the case, but certainly in Edinburgh where I studied it was. An engineering degree, and then after the first or second year you can then start to diversify. The difference between the two, civil engineering is generally looking at stationary static structures. Mechanical engineering is more about motion, machinery, processes as well. The reality is the two blur, and lots of the concepts are the same, and they blur between each other. But for my part, as a permanent way engineer, we are dealing with civil engineering materials, so concrete, steel, aggregates, earthworks. We're dealing with these sort of civil engineering materials, but we're having to apply them with mechanical engineering tolerances. So you're talking about millimeter accuracies. The contact patch under each train wheel is about the size of a 5p piece, or about the size of your thumbnail. That's tiny, and if you can imagine that you've got 10-15 tons going through each of those for a train that could be doing 300 kilometers an hour or more, that's an incredible amount of force, and the tolerances have to be for high speed track. You're talking about plus or minus 0.5 millimeter tolerances, so really kind of really small tolerances. Everything has to be got right. If you get it wrong, bad things happen. But that's part of the fun, is managing that. And for me, that 50% civil, 50% mechanical engineering is a really, it just helps me to get the best of the kind of the balance of both things. I'm working with a mechanical moving system, a system that's very dynamic. I have to manage lots of dynamic forces. Have to deal with the fact that this is a system that people use, that freight has to use, all those things. At the same time, it's very much civil engineering. I've got to build something that works, that stays upright, that I don't end up the train disappearing down into infinity below you. So yeah, I love that. Right. Any other questions? Yeah, Bjorn's saying that my pronunciation was moderately okay. I'll take that. I'll take that. Right, let's go on to the next slide. Oh yes, so it's not all about. In fact, you know what? Let's go back to the previous slide. This picture's great. It shows you the difference really between how railway systems, how railways have moved on. So on the right hand side, you've basically got kind of the best of suburban railways in the first half of the previous century, and on the left hand side, you've really got the best of intercity railways at the end of the 20th century. Actually, this is High Speed 1. This was the first. This was the first new main line built in the UK. I said the 21st century in the previous slide. Actually, it was built at the end of the end of the previous century and the start of this century. But actually, really, it's quite old. High Speed 2 will not look a huge amount like it. It's quite in terms of the technology, it's very much 20th century technology. So. The way the electrification is designed, but the track, the ballast, all that is very much a 20th century, the best of 20th century railways there. Even the train there, you see, an E320, that's an early, that's from the late 2000s in terms of train design. The world has actually moved on quite a bit. But fundamentally, the railway, two rails made of steel, or two metal rails, should we say, supported by something, and often with ballast around it, that's how railways have looked for 200 years now. In fact, longer even. And the reason for that isn't because it's an outdated technology, isn't because of X, Y, it's because it's phenomenally energy efficient. It's unbeatably energy. There is no more energy efficient way of moving loads across land, which is really cool because it feels like you're part of this history, this sort of historic element of railways at the same time of them being absolutely at the forefront of transport technology. Forget the Musks of the world. Railways are the most exciting modern way of moving people around, far more than, I don't know. The only thing that is going to beat them is when Star Trek transporters become a thing, but I think we're way off that yet. Right, so it's not just about passenger railways, I'll point out. For me, actually, some of the most interesting jobs I work on are actually freight schemes. So here we've got we've got a nice diesel freight train there running under the wires. Let's not worry about that too much for now. We're working on it. But you can see it's got lots of nice boxes behind it, these container wagons behind. The issue with square container wagons is that lots of our structures in the UK, particularly in the UK actually, with our masonry structures, are nice arches. So when you're trying to get a nice big square box through a nice round arch, we're talking literally about square peg, round hole. And that leaves a bit of a problem. And the problem there is called gauge clearance, and the process of freight gauge enhancements, as we call them, or just gauging jobs is the shorthand, is basically working out how to solve that problem. Do you take the bridge and demolish it? Do you lower the track to get those containers down underneath the arch? Are there alternative clever things you can do? Can you fix the track in place to change the way how much it moves over time? Do you change the maintenance regime? Lots of little things. But ultimately, what that means is freight trains, which are hugely more energy efficient than road. You know, one freight train, one driver, when chronic driver shortages as well, one driver is hauling maybe 80 HGVs worth of goods. That's phenomenally energy efficient. And actually, because of that tiny little contact patch on the top of the rail, between the wheel and the rail, the energy efficiency is phenomenal. So, you know, one for every ton, a ton of goods, for every 100 miles the road hauls it, for the same energy, railway can haul it for 300 miles. It's an absolute no-brainer to get as much freight onto the railways as possible. And actually, these jobs that I do, the various ones around, so I did one between Leeds and Doncaster, I did another one down in West Anglia, others down that are still coming to fruition on the Midland Main Line, electrification rather put paid to that, but anyway, or the cancellation of that project. But anyway, those jobs, you can see, I love those, because more than passenger jobs, to be honest, I see an immediate benefit for people because, so many thousands, so many tens of thousands, or even so many 100,000 lorries are being taken off the road every year. I love those jobs. They're fascinating. Anyway, I've gone off on one a lot. Let's have a look at some questions. Phil Daniels asks, Hi Gareth, in case you missed my earlier tweet, I might well have, sorry Phil. My son's a software engineer whose work has just dried up. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you have any contacts in the industry who could make use of his skills? Lots of them. And they are lots of them are on Twitter, and would love for your son to get involved. Lots of the problems we have on the railway at the moment, things like Crossrail being delayed, the delays and problems with new trains are all software related. The rail industry, partly because of boom and bust investment from government and for a variety of reasons, we're not bringing in enough software engineers, enough people with really high skills on the sort of soft skill kind of engineering. So, computer, IT, and software. We need to bring more of you in. So there's a demand for these things. So when all of this kind of the COVID-19 stuff, we get past it. Let's hope we get past it in some sensible shape. The demand is going to peak right back up again, and perhaps if people have changed their habits and are not driving as much, actually the demand for rail might even increase even more. What that means is we're going to need software engineers desperately. So Bombardier in Derby, for example, is continuing to trying to recruit software engineers, and they have a really good recruitment program, really good graduate scheme, which would be open to anyone, I think, to go through with the right sort of skills and experience. Get involved. But as an industry, we're crying out for software engineers, desperate. Lewis is going to question dump. Okay, right. How does one go from finishing a degree in engineering to being a senior engineer in rail? There seem to be very few rail-specific graduate schemes around with very few places. So I went from my degree programme. Oh, it's warm in here. You might have noticed how warm it is. by the fact that I'm not in a jumper anymore, and we've had the sun baking through. I've got cardboard on the window to try and sort of reduce the glare. Home working, we're getting there. So how do I do it? So I finished my degree and I applied for a load of graduate schemes at engineering consultancies, sort of looking at civil engineering placements. I knew I had a rail interest, but I was applying generally to consultancies and to contractors as well. So I think I applied to Babcock, for example, and I applied to Atkins and to quite a few others. And I actually got my job with Atkins originally. And I now work for Arcadis. Both excellent companies to work for. Yes, probably the next 3 months is not the time to be applying for a job, which is not ideal when that's literally the time to be applying for a job if you're finishing a degree. The world is sort of in a bit of a funny place. But all this chaos notwithstanding, apply for those graduate schemes. And to answer the next question, Lewis, which I think you've put in, anything current students. So Lewis Cotty, is that right? Cauty. Sorry, Lewis. Lewis asks if there's anything current students should be doing to set them apart if they're interested in a career in railways. The reason I'm reading these questions out carefully is because when I crop the video, I think I just worked this out today, when I crop the video, all the live chat disappears, so it's worth me reading them out. Yes, get involved in heritage railways. It's easy labour and it's an easy way to show you have rail experience. I sat and chatted, and okay, my master's thesis was on railways, and so that's another good way, is to make your thesis on railways if you've got a supervisor who can support that sort of a job if you're doing a degree. But get involved in your local heritage railway. Get involved and show that you're interested and engaged in doing engineering on that level, and not just running the trains. But we're talking about, if you want to get into engineering, then you need to get involved in either the mechanical engineering of the locomotive, or helping dig out sleepers and rebuild S&C, or do signalling, rebuild their signalling, or get involved in the signal box, that sort of stuff. Good question. RWG 1986. So. RWG 1986 asks, what grabbed me about the railways initially? Now that is a tricky question. Let's see what the next picture is actually. What grabbed me about the railways initially was, here we go, nearly there. Getting there. My videos are loading. Apologies everyone for the, there we go, right. Sorry. Basically, I loved linear infrastructure, and that includes motorways, so roads, just infrastructure in general. I don't know whether it's, we used to drive from Inverurie in the far north of Scotland, where things look a bit like this, down to North Devon, where my grandparents live, twice a year, in fact, for a long time. And I used to go past the Forth Bridge and over the Forth Road Bridge, which would just deeply fascinate me. I used to go past, I saw the M74 getting built down through over Beatook. Saw the M60 getting finished, the M1 extension, all these motorways getting built, which in hindsight was dreadful. We shouldn't have been doing that at all. But seeing them getting built was for me as a kid, absolutely, as a young kid, and then even up to being a young teenager, I found it absolutely fascinating. And then as I started, so I thought I want to be an architect, and I thought, oh no, I don't want to be an architect at all. Yes, I find creative stuff interesting, but actually engineering is really creative. You really get to apply creativity in really interesting ways with fiddly bits, and then the broader picture as well. And engineering for me, that broader picture and the fiddly stuff, it's all about, engineering is all about these two, the flip sides of this, particularly the type of engineering I do. It's both, and I love that. So that just drew it to me, and I realised that railways is what I wanted to do. As I was going through school and then university, it was like railways are fascinating. The social context, the history, the engineering itself, it's just fantastic. Let's see, so, Phil, no worries, you're welcome for the Bombardier tip. Any companies from Manchester or York? Network Rail, for starters. You're going to be wanting to look at Siemens. They're going to be opening their, so for anyone out there, Siemens are going to be opening their train manufacturing plant in Goole to manufacture some of London Underground's deep tube stock. Look out for jobs. Michael McFarland asks, what opportunities are in demand for older workers without prior rail experience and without an engineering degree? Quite a few. I'm not going to say it's going to be super easy for you to just walk into a job, but particularly given the crisis we've had now, Lots of things in flux. This is a good time to, firstly, update your CV, look at what experience you've got, put that experience down on paper, work out what the transferable skills are, put it in context of the job you're applying for, of course. But if you've got transferable skills, if you're engaged, interested, keen to learn, that's sort of age independent. It doesn't matter whether you're old or young. There will be a job at the rail industry. Okay, not even just rail engineering, but the rail industry at large is a huge. 600,000 people are employed by this industry. There is somewhere for you to work within this industry, and I look forward to seeing you in it sometime soon. Lewis Bergen in Rue, do you remember Oscar's Bar? Yeah, painfully. I moved away before I really was old enough to go to Oscar's Bar, so I came back. Had a this is not a story for now, right? Oscars, quite enough of that. Where were we? I was going through my nice presentation, wasn't I? Here we go. That's my design software. You've seen that already. There's me walking the track. You've seen that already. There's a E320 going at full speed. There's a freight train. Right, the next thing I want to talk about, how are we doing time-wise? 21 minutes already. Quite a few questions. Oh, I'll tell you what. While I've got this picture of... someone guess which platform this is in the chat while I have a look at Twitter to see if there are any questions. Let's have a look, because it's important to try and answer questions from everywhere I can. There we are. That's happened, and Tracy's absolutely on fire with the tweeting there here. It's quite impressive. Lovely. Oh, yep, very nice. People are unhappy about various things on my Twitter feed. That's standard. Good. Right. Sorry for that delay. Just worth checking if anyone asking any questions, since this is a Q&A. Cool, right, excellent. So this topic that I've got up on screen now, let's just go in here. The topic I've got up on screen now is one really close to my heart, and it's about the gap between trains, their step on the train, and the platform surface. And we call that system, because it's a system, it's a very complicated system, we call it the platform train interface. Interface is a kind of a threshold, if you like, a barrier between two systems. And the challenge we have is that you have platforms and then trains. You want the platform, so you want that step, you want the floor of the train to be low, and you want it to be the step to be as close to the edge of the platform as possible, so that you firstly minimise the risk presented by that gap, so people don't fall down, because at the moment that risk is the biggest one on the railway in terms of the harm that we do to passengers at that threshold. It's something we need to improve. So that's number one. Number two, accessibility. For me, I think it is totally obscene that in this day and age you need a ramp to let people who are in a wheelchair get on and off trains. That's just ridiculous. It's completely bonkers, and the idea that we designed that in still with brand new trains, for me, is baffling. This is why we need new people, new blood, new ideas into the industry to kind of flush out some of these ridiculous old ideas about how you build trains. Just get rid of them, because to be honest, given that we're electrifying the railways, we're running out of excuses to be building train floors that are up here when we have a very good platform position here. And that's not just me with an infrastructure hat on. We have a predefined platform position that's very good in terms of where it is to allow freight to go past with the freight containers kind of over the top, but also to get nice and close to the train and to where that footstep is. So the platform, so all we need to do in terms of platforms is continue to build them at the right place, and the challenge we have is lots of platforms aren't built in the right place, so we need a rolling program of platform upgrades and yada yada. But also we need people to come into the train building industry to understand that putting your train floor up here is bonkers and you need to lower it down. Technology, engineering is all about taking new constraints and managing to do just as much, if not more, than we've done before within new constraints. Whether those are, energy efficiency, Dyson, I'm looking at you, rubbish engineer, or if I'm, looking at trains and kind of getting them to go faster within, look at the HST, we managed to get it to go up to much higher speeds and brake within existing signalling spacing. So we've got constraints, we can work within them. That's what engineering is all about. So this one is one I'm incredibly passionate about, because I just don't think the way that there's not enough momentum within the industry to fix this, in my opinion. But there are points of light, Merseyrail being one of them. David Powell particularly is really leading the charge on that. I'm sure he'd name lots of people who are supporting him, but Merseyrail are doing some fantastic stuff on that. And the reason is because they've looked at the railway as a system. And I think the current generation, or the next generation of people joining the industry, are probably a lot better at looking at systems and less siloed, which is a really good thing, because a lot of people do think in their little bubble and don't step back. Very important as engineers that we step back and look at the bigger picture. But that's part of what I enjoy about it. This presentation really, or this chat is really about me showing how much I love the railways. And what I love about the railways is the fact that you have that interaction with lots of different people, people across different walks of life, different disciplines, different experiences. And I love that. It's by far my favourite thing about the rail industry is the people within it. And I think we've just seen a slice of that today. This wonderful selection of different people sharing what they do, what they love about the rail industry. It's brilliant. Love every minute of it. It's really great. Lewis is laughing at me and asking if this is Tunbridge. Michael McFarland is right. This is, I believe, Wimbledon, yeah. Dreadful platform train interface. Really bad, horrible gap. Not good. We have to fix it. So, let's go to the next slide. Yes. So, platform train interface is something that I do day to day, by the way. Let's bring that picture up. Day to day, I'm working with platforms all the time. There's no way of avoiding that fact. They're everywhere, and designing through them is quite challenging. But that's not the only thing I spend a lot of my time doing. So a lot of our designs, actually, it's not all about the track, believe it or not. It is. Don't tell anyone. There are other disciplines too. One of them is the structural and civil engineers. And the fact remains that there are lots of bridges on the railway network. In fact, Network Rail, who's the infrastructure manager of the British Rail Network, they're the biggest bridge builders in the world, bar none. Incredible statistic. And they don't just build bridges, they have to look after bridges that there is no way of replacing. And good examples of those are viaducts, particularly masonry and brick and stone viaducts. You cannot bulldoze one and start again, or at least I haven't seen it happen very often. So actually what we need to do, and generally you don't need to, they're good structures, they'll last indefinitely, given the right care. One of the things that involves doing is working out ways to strengthen or improve the performance of these massive viaducts. One of them is this one here. I can't remember the name, but it's south of Manchester. So it's actually on the West Coast Main Line on the approach into Manchester. Feel free, if any nerds are in the chat, tell me which one it is. But you can see here there's a civil engineering solution, or a structural solution. They've come up with this little sort of trough, concrete trough that they put. We lift the track off, put the trough in, put the track back in, and it improves the performance, the dynamic loading, the way the loads transfer through that structure. And you might think, oh great, but what on earth has the track got to do with any of that? Well, for starters, we need to identify what the track was doing before we take it off and where it was, so that we can put it back in the right place, or potentially put it somewhere slightly different, either to allow for the new shape of, the new profile of the structure to make sure you're not hitting it with trains, or perhaps you can squeeze some more speed or improve the performance of the railway slightly, maybe even get rid of some defects, if there are any defects there. There are always defects. I don't know why I'm whispering there towards, because it's here, isn't it? Anyway, the magic of television. So, taking the track off, putting it back on requires permit way engineers to be involved. So we go out, we survey the track, we work out what's there now, notice any defects, anything we need to look after or fix before the civil engineers come in, or perhaps afterwards. And it's all about working together, getting that whole railway system. It's one system, you can't avoid it. And you'll notice here there's OLE as well. So Gary Keener, who's done some terrific videos earlier today, he and the team, the overhead line engineering team, they need to know where the track is so they can put the OLE back in the right place. Or perhaps cleverly, we don't need to move the OLE and we put the track in such a place that the OLE still works above without needing any moving. This is all about prolonging the lifespan of our materials, of our structures, and making the railways environmentally friendly as possible, as sustainable as possible, and as economic as possible as well. Yeah, so that's that. Any questions about... let's have a look. Right, so, more questions. Lewis Bergen asks, is there anything I can do as a rail fan to help nudge the flow for change? Should I write letters to MPs, MSPs, or industry types who will listen? Absolutely. The best thing you can do to fix railway problems is relentlessly write to your MP. And even better than that is to get other people to write to your MP as well. Because if your MP has got the ear of a problem, they're going to be paying attention and they're going to want people to solve that problem, which is where we come in. Hello! Or particularly the politically tuned in engineers. Admittedly, a lot of engineers kind of keep their head below the parapet. Fair enough. But I think there's a bigger world out there, and I think it's important that engineers get involved a bit more and maybe be a bit more outspoken at solving some of the problems we're facing. Lewis asks, another Lewis C, asks, PTI seems like a really interesting challenge. The Permanent Way Institution in Nottingham and Derby had a great talk by Professor Bridget Eickhoff that I managed to make this year. Bridget Eickhoff and I'm very pleased to say I see Bridget reasonably frequently, maybe less frequently than I'd like actually. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and she just has the railway's best interest at heart and people's safety and but also she's not just safety, she's very economically minded as well, so she knows what the realities are of the railway. She worked for British Rail Research, so if you can find anything by her on the Permanent Way Institute website. I'm the section secretary for York, so have lots of. If you have any PWI questions, feel free to ask them. Indeed, there's all sorts of resources, and her presentation should be available as well. I'm just going to check Twitter again for any more questions. Yes, good. Timesheet related issues. Apologies, I'll fix that momentarily. How long are we doing? 31:48. It's been a bit longer than the previous one, but I think that's all right. It doesn't matter too much. Lots of interesting questions so far. So next slide. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute and just check Twitter. Lovely. Yes, marvellous. Lots of C's. Lots of... good stuff. Right, so... Sorry, this is a bit ad hoc. I'll tell you what, let's go full screen for a moment. Let's give you some face cam only. Hello, everyone. So, for those of you who weren't here earlier, this is the office. This is where I'm sure lots of you've got the same experience of doing your best to work from home. This is the railway wall behind me. Fair few Easter eggs in amongst, particularly this side. Particularly this here. This is good. Also, some other things that you might recognise. There's a bit of FFU up here. The new Newark Flat Crossing is made of that. Various bits and pieces. And these shelves are kind of loading up. There's an old copy of Modern Railways down there. My rail magazine is going to be getting collected. They're going to start piling up there as well. Anyway, so that's all that. Let's see, what other questions have we got? Keep sending your questions. Career questions are good. We've had loads of really good career questions. I'm quite pleased about that. Let's crack on with... Oh, I didn't want to do that. Let's see where that's going to open. That's fine. This is the problem, having too many icons in your start bar. Right, so this picture here, which you can't see because I've not selected the button. Let's go back to the face cam. This picture here is... let's get this working again. This picture here is Shenfield Junction, which is one of the first bits of railway I worked on, actually. It's up at the northeast end of Crossrail, in fact, and it's all about splitting up fast non-stop trains and slower frequent stopping kind of suburban services, and also slower kind of urban services as well, kind of getting them all out of the way so that they can all flow doing the thing they need to do without getting in each other's way, which is really the cut and thrust of junction design these days. As much as possible, we're trying to segregate different service patterns so they have their own lines, so they don't get in each other's way, and so you can run a high density service pattern across all sorts, across long distance, suburban, metro services, the whole works. And this is, so where kind of permanent way design gets complicated at these junctions, these areas where tracks cross and trains are able to move between tracks. We call them switches and crossings. And you can see that they get complicated not just because of the track itself, but actually you can see there's lots of other things we're having to look at. So there's powering all of the equipment to move the points. There's OLE above, which gets quite fiddly at junctions, very fiddly. The signalling, you can see all those little speed signs. And then the actual coloured light signals, all that has to pay attention to the switches and crossings. It's all got to be detected, and we've all got to talk to each other to make sure that we're not doing the wrong thing and causing any problems for the other headaches for the other disciplines, or trying to minimise the amount of headaches we cause for the other disciplines, because invariably our different requirements are all pulling in different directions. So that's kind of the first job that I really kind of worked on, sort of supporting another engineer. So I was doing a lot of CAD work, but also a bit of design and a few bits and pieces. And then the next job, we talk about new railways. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to do this. We talk about new railways. This was the first new railway I worked on, and it was also the first time I opened the design tools that you saw earlier. This is Hitch and Flyover. Absolutely fascinating little project. This is again where we had a junction that looks a bit like Shenfield, and actually what we wanted to do is get rid of this and make it all sort of grade separated, a bit like is currently happening down at Warrington, or at Warrington near Peterborough. Again, we're grade separating quite a busy junction. In this case, taking freight trains and passenger trains up over the East Coast Main Line on their way to Cambridge and Folkestone and various places. But particularly this is for the Cambridge services that come through Hitchin and whiz off up the Shepworth branch. Correct me if I'm getting all this wrong, it's been a while. Anyway, this is the first time I opened the design tools, and I was doing the vertical alignment, which was quite tricky because you had overhead line electrification on the East Coast Main Line that you needed to get up and over the top of, but also you couldn't have the position of the point where the tracks split apart couldn't be too far into Hitchin because there wasn't the space to put it. So there was the challenge of how steep the track could be, given that freight trains would run on it, and how steep, not so much them starting actually it was them starting and stopping, given the position of some of the signals on this overbridge, this flyover, the Hitchin flyover as we call it. So it's quite tricky getting that balance right of not too steep, but also steep enough that you could get up and over the East Coast Main Line. And we did actually lower the electrification a little bit, I think, underneath as well, just to get that balance, to get the balance right. Another challenge was things like thermal expansion of this huge bridge, particularly a curvy bridge. You've got lots of different forces, sort of, the bridge isn't just stretching laterally, which is kind of easy to deal with. It's stretching it's stretching in a curved shape, so the forces were quite interesting to play with. Plus it was a very tight curve, so horizontally we had to do quite a bit with managing in terms of the curvature, managing roll and contact fatigue, which is almost like if you bend a teaspoon, eventually it snaps. It's the same with rails. If you don't get that 5p piece on the top of the railhead right, particularly around curves, there's a chance that you're bending the rail, you're causing fractures in the rail, and it can fail. So it was a really, really interesting project to work on, actually. It was the first where I opened the design tools. So I've gone through all sorts of bits and pieces there, many different things. I'm going to go back to this slide here to finish on, but now's it's open mic time. Send me your questions, anything you can think of at all. And of course, if for all the rail people following, I'm back again on here talking at 7 p.m. for Rail Natter. So that's like in an hour. So I'm going to go down and have some quick food and spend some time with Dina, and then whiz back up here. This is self-inflicted, I can't really moan about it. But today has been Rail Human Library, and it's been absolutely brilliant. Big thank you to everyone who's got involved, particularly to Tracy and to Lucy who've driven this thing forwards. Just honestly, it's been really good. Considering that it was cancelled because of the virus, there's been an absolutely just an incredible response from the industry. A lot of people kind of juggling technology they've clearly never worked before, but doing a really good job of it. Others just nailing it, and with whiteboards and model trains. Gary's jerry-rigged thing with his light rig, just brilliant. Really, really good. Really, everyone's mucked in, and it's been great. I'm really, really pleased to see it all. Right, some more questions. Lewis is asking all the questions. How many have we got watching at the moment? A few. If I hadn't been a track permanent way engineer, track engineers and permanent way engineers, not quite the same thing, but people often say they're basically the same thing. So yeah, used interchangeably is fine. And to choose another discipline in rail, what would you have chosen? It's a very good question. I'd have probably ended up in civil engineering, because that was what I studied and that's what I know. But to be honest, I'm not a good pure civil engineer. I much prefer the system approach and the way that permanent way and the way that we're almost like the glue that binds the railway jigsaw, permanent way engineering. And also, you don't have a railway without the permanent way. It's just a road, right? Progress update on #PWay book. Well, it's been delayed a bit for a variety of reasons, but I'm still hoping to get the first PDF draft out this year. 2020 is the year of #PWay book. Essentially, it's my version of Gary's book, except it won't be anything like Gary's book, because Gary's book is detailed, it's thorough, it's exhaustive. My book's going to be more of a kind of an intro and covering as much ground as possible, but as quickly as possible. So they're kind of doing different things, but Gary's hashtag was good, wasn't it? OLE book was great. Anyway, enough about my book. This is all about you guys. You people who want to join the railway, please do. We need you. We certainly will in 3 months. It'll be a different world. Lots and lots of comments. Good stuff. Lots of thoughts. There we go. Yep, no questions that I can see. Just some queries about various bits and pieces. Right, okay. I think I might draw a line under that. Thanks so much for joining. I hope that's okay. Oh, wait a minute. I can do some tech here. Let's go back to Facecam. Thanks so much for joining. Today's been fantastic. Check out the Human Rail Library hashtag. There's just unending amounts of brilliant stuff in there, particularly if you're a parent and you want kind of to show stuff to your kids and show them a variety of different disciplines. If you're in sixth form yourselves or in college, university, loads of really great stuff there. Honestly, just go and check that hashtag out on Twitter. It's brilliant. This will be on YouTube. The live comments disappear because I trim it to get rid of the kind of the wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff at each end. It's basically naff and me waving for like 5 minutes while I work out where this off button is. But you'll be able to catch it on YouTube. See me on for the second episode of hashtag RailNatter later on this evening at 7 p.m. And have a good rest of the evening. Enjoy the sunshine from your gardens, balconies, living rooms. Stay indoors. Keep safe. And cheerio.